Двух, что ли, нет? Нет, надо сесть, но наоборот тогда. Наоборот, вот, блин, что расстраивает в такой ситуации? Ты готовишь, и там вот с гулькин нос надо. Да, типа того. Ну, типа того. Это я уже видел. Ну, у тебя дальше научное искусство. Это тоже интересно. Эй! Не знаю, как вам, а мне интересно почти все.
Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. In today's video, we'll discuss the history of hats and hat-wearing culture and attempt to answer the question of why men stopped wearing them. When looking at old photographs or watching old movies, you've probably heard people comment on the copious amount of hats worn in...
Понимаешь, если, ну, типа, про это говорит, наоборот, ну, надо... Да нет, ну ладно, кстати.
And when discussing previous eras, you've probably heard the often overused phrase that a man wouldn't leave the house without a hat on. Phrased another way, it's all about the hats. Why is this? Well, it's one of the clearest visual signifiers that differentiates the good old days from today. At least within the context of the lineage of classic menswear, men today are still wearing suits on a day-to-day basis, even if they are becoming less common, but the hat is increasingly rarely worn. In fact, to turn that overused phrase on its head, most men today leave the house without ever even thinking of putting on a hat. In the summer months, of course, you may see a baseball cap or two to shield the wearer's eyes from the sun, at least when it's worn in the traditional orientation. Or you may see various types of woolly hats in the winter just to keep the wearer's head warm. But these more utilitarian types of hats aren't necessarily what we're referring to here. Rather, we're discussing hats of the 19th and 20th centuries, such as the fedora, trilby, Homburg, pork pie, straw boater, flat cap, or even the top hat. These were the classic types of headwear that would adorn any man's head when he was out and about for business or for leisure. So then, what happened and what changed, and why did men stop wearing hats? Well, in order to answer that question, we'll have to dive into the history of hats. Hats have been around forever.
Чтоб снимать их,
Oh, you want more? Okay, well,
при короле или вообще знак согласия, почтения, да. Знак согласия такой, я понимаю.
suppose it is a bit more complex than that. In truth, though, hats have been around since before historical records even began. In fact, the oldest surviving example of prehistoric clothing that we've found does include a hat. Specifically, it's one made of bear skin worn by Ötzi the Iceman. He was discovered in the Alps in 1991, an estimated 5,000 years or so after his death. Like Ötzi himself, the hat was encased in ice, and once we thought it out, we found that it was made of various pieces of bear skin that were sewn together. It even had leather thongs or straps that were likely used to hold the hat to the wearer's head. However, these must not have worked too well because Ötzi had clearly lost his hat a little while before he died. The first thing that humans naturally shield from the elements or from falling objects is the head. It makes complete sense then that prehistoric peoples from all over the world are shown to have made hats at some point. In fact, they may even be the oldest known type of garment made by humans. So as to the question of when hats began, we can't really say for certain. Cultures from all over the world and throughout history have made hats from all different kinds of materials, including plants, leather, fur, wool, felt, and today even things like plastic. In addition to protection, which we also mentioned before, hats have been worn for various other reasons, including fashion, to show association, or even to show social status or class. For an iconic example of this, we can show social status or class. For an iconic example of this, we can look to the late 19th and early 20th century with the clear distinction between the upper classes, who wore top hats, and the lower classes, who wore flat caps. But to dive further into some of the various reasons we just mentioned, we can go back a bit further in history. For example, in the Middle Ages, you can see hats like the coiffe, which were worn for protection, or the chaperon, which were worn for fashion. In the 1600s, the cavaliers famously wore large-brimmed hats with big feathers to show allegiance to the king. In the 1700s, we saw the tricorn hat, which today is commonly associated with pirates, but in that day was actually quite fashionable. The flat brim of previous styles was now pinned up to the crown of the hat, and the large feather was replaced by a bow, perhaps for ease of use when drawing a sword with a sweeping motion. And up to the crown of the hat, and the large feather was replaced by a bow, perhaps for ease of use when drawing a sword with a sweeping motion. And the closely related bicorn hat was a common feature of military uniforms from the 1790s to the early 1900s, although the unicorn hat isn't well suited for battle. In the late 1700s, beaver felt top hats were invented, and by the 1800s, they were all the rage. And through the 1800s, most of our favorite modern hat styles were born. The bowler hat came along in the mid-1800s, and the 1880s gave us both the fedora, although it wouldn't become a men's hat until the 1920s, and the German hunting hat known as the Homburg. The Homburg wouldn't hit the world stage until the 1890s, however, when King Edward VII wore one on his return from a hunting trip to Germany. And of course, we've got comprehensive guides on all of the hat styles we just mentioned, and more in our hats playlist here. So, by the turn of the 20th century, there were many different hat options available to men, and the fedora cemented itself as a predominant option, replacing the top hat, Homburg, and bowler to some extent, although these styles were continually worn as well. The fedora's popularity was also cemented due to its frequent appearances in movies, where stars like Cary Grant and Humphrey.
Но американец у него, все равно слышно, что американец просто. А нет, что ли, не американец? Американский, английский, слышно.
Bogart wore it, and in the 1950s, musicians like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin continued to make it popular. In the 1960s, the closely related trilby hat took over as the most popular hat style for men. To sum all of this up, then, hats have been with us in one form or another basically since forever. So, after the 1960s, Dean Martin continued to make it popular. In the 1960s, the closely related trilby hat took over as the most popular hat style for men. To sum all of this up, then, hats have been with us in one form or another basically since forever. So, after the 1960s, what happened? As we mentioned in our video on how to wear a hat with style and confidence, which you can find here, the decline in hat wearing is often attributed to President John F. Kennedy going hatless at his inauguration in 1961. But in fact, this isn't true, and further, JFK actually revived the tradition of wearing a top hat to one's inauguration, which had been dormant for a short time. So, in other words, no, one man 60 years ago is not solely responsible for the modern man usually leaving his house bareheaded. In fact, there are many socio-cultural reasons why the tradition of hat wearing declined. As we also mentioned in that previous video, one such reason may have been that men returning from the world wars were sick of wearing helmets or uniform headgear, but this may not be a principal reason either. More significantly then, we think we've got four main reasons why hat wearing declined. And the first of these is climate control. One of the biggest reasons for the loss of hat wearing is likely that we now have better control over our indoor climate than we used to. This is also why men can now go in and out of doors wearing sometimes fewer than 2 layers of clothing, and why things like gloves and scarves aren't as popular as they used to be. Let's say like gloves and scarves aren't as popular as they. The loss of hat wearing is likely that we now have better control over our indoor climate than we used to. This is also why men can now go in and out of doors wearing sometimes fewer than 2 layers of clothing, and why things like gloves and scarves aren't as popular as they used to be. Let's say it's a cold winter's day. Leaving your heated office for 20 seconds to get into your heated car, which you'll drive home and then leave for another 10 seconds to enter your heated house, means that you probably aren't going to bother with copious layers like a heavy overcoat, scarf, gloves, and hat. Most men are dressing more or less for room temperature all the time. Our second reason then, which we touched on before, is notions of social class. Before the World Wars, social class was an incredibly important aspect of Western society, and people were absolutely expected to know their place. But after the horrors of war brought every social class just a bit closer, we began to focus more on the individual rather than on the class in which they resided. As a result, then, the practice of wearing clothing, and particularly hats, to signify yourself as part of a distinct group has become largely extinct. These days, even the very wealthy are more likely to show off how much money they have by how fast their car is or how expensive their watch is, for example. Or you could take a look at figures like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, who generally dress just like the rest of us. Perhaps the biggest of all of these reasons, though, is the increasing prevalence of highway systems and automobiles over the 20th and 21st centuries. The next time you're on a train, in the subway, or on a bus or tram, look up and consider how much headroom you have above you. Depending on your height, when you're standing up, you'll have anywhere between 2 and 3 feet of space between the top of your head and the ceiling of the car. Back when these were the main types of mass transport, tall hats like stovepipes could be worn comfortably, as they wouldn't even come close to touching the ceiling. The same can be said for horse-drawn carriages, which also often offered plenty of headroom. Meanwhile, though, look up at the ceiling in your own car. How much headroom do you have there? The answer is probably not much, perhaps even for a relatively soft or short hat style. Simply put, modern cars aren't built to accommodate the hat styles of old. Early automobiles did somewhat accommodate these hat styles, either by having open roofs, tall canvases that could be pulled back and opened up, or just having taller roof heights in general. But even as early as the 1920s, roofs on automobiles got lower. Remember that the most primitive reason for wearing a hat is to protect your head from the elements or falling objects. But when you're in an enclosed car, you don't need that kind of head protection. Curiously, special cars with taller roofs were made to accommodate the wearing of top hats, but these were ultimately historical curiosities that could only be afforded by the very wealthy. So, for everyone else, the invention of motor cars made taller hat styles mostly impractical. Furthermore, stiffer hat styles like the bowler or Homburg could also be crushed or misshapen by lower ceilings, whereas the fedora and trilby are naturally crushable and can be packed and stored more easily. And as time developed and softer felt hats like the fedora and trilby became
Что-то
more
я так
popular,
засиделся тут, да? Интересно, когда все это, понимаю, тут да, понимаю.
The gazing eye sees the fate of the world. The future, it's already been written. Really? I'm not so sure about that. Besides, who's to say I can't change it? And maybe light will prevail.
That is a heart binder. You have a gift, Sora, for connecting with others. And this makes that gift stronger.
I was thinking about Roxas. He's trapped here in my heart, but he needs a body to be himself again.
Oh, don't worry. Yenzo's working on a way to get him free. I'll bet you he's got the perfect body all lined up.
You know what the magic is for? We have to protect the world order.
The Heartless here are stronger than what we expected. I think we need to go back to Master Yensid's tower so we can regroup.
But Aqua's still down here alone, facing enemies like that. How long are we supposed to keep her waiting in this awful place?
Every journey worth going on needs a cricket to keep track of it. And I can't let you start this one without old Jiminy Cricket by your side.
You gotta answer the phone, Sora, or we can't give you updates. We got lots and lots of important stuff we want to tell you. That's why we asked Master Yensid to make sure you got this gummy phone we made you.
Sora, the reason we're here is because you and your friends defeated our nobodies, thereby recompleting us. Xemnas and Xehanort have no hold over us now.
When have we ever seen a tornado of shadowy blobs before? It's not weird. This is unprecedented.
I guess it is.
The creatures from the last time were bright white. These things must be new. Man, I can't wait to get to sleuthin'.
We're already done with the school project, silly. Whatever's going on, you wouldn't be here unless you had a good reason.
Soon as we can, we're gonna go on a big adventure, just like you and Uncle Donald. We got more gummy blocks for you to choose from. We sure could use your business.
The mark of a truly great chef is creating masterpieces out of anything. You can start right here in town.
Roxas and Nominee, if there is any reason that I still draw breath, it is to atone for what I did to them.
I made Terra a promise. I said I'd be there for him when he needs me.
And I'll figure Roxas out. Don't know how, but I'll get him back.
Nominee is right here safe with me. I know that we'll find a way to help her. Trust me, I'm not giving up.
I only wish we could have returned to help sooner. We're grateful to all of you for rescuing us.
You never stop lighting my way back. I heard you too, Ven. You found me, just like you promised.
Need some help?
Terra, Aqua, Ven. Forgive your foolish teacher. I put you through such a harrowing experience.
There was one last thing I needed in order for me to be whole again. A connection. Sora helped me find my way back here, to my friends.
Rest, Axel. Roxas will fight in your place. And I'll fight for Kyrie.
I can see my family anytime I want. If I stayed, I'd have to be apart from the person I love most. And that life would be empty.
Well, what do you know? Sora, Donald, Goofy. Guess I owe you a big thank you.
Thank you, my boy. Now, watch your old man work. All right, I know I dotted my I's, crossed my T's, zeroed the hero. So what gives? Who could possibly be trying to give me a migraine by yodeling that Yutz's name?
There's nothing else beyond this. You've wandered here more than once before on your visits to the Station of Awakening, but I let that slide.
This isn't where we belong. We've been in this toy store long enough. It's time for us to go home to Andy's room.
They have been there for us so far. You can't deny that. Every toy deserves a fair shake.
Wait, hold on. I don't think I'm emotionally prepared. Would you calm down? Don't worry, I got you covered.
Our ship is no more. Fear not. We still have our new home.
Rex has just been dino-napped. My men saw him get hauled up to the second floor, sir.
They must have taken him to another location. We have to hurry.
I'm Rapunzel's mother. The poor child left home without a word, and I've just been worried sick. Please tell me, where is my dear, sweet girl?
What do you want with my hair? To cut it? Sell it? Wait, you don't want my hair?
Why on earth would I want your hair? Look, I was being chased. I saw a tower. I climbed it. Okay? End of story.
This is my home now. I can't go back. I don't want to hurt anyone. Arendelle is safer with me staying up here. I shouldn't have upset her. I shouldn't have upset her the way I did. Elsa ran away because she was frightened. I have to bring her home.
Anna was struck in the heart by Elsa's ice magic. If the ice isn't removed, she'll freeze forever. Only an act of true love can thaw a frozen heart.
Wow, look at all the pretty colors. There's blue and green. Ooh, I love green. There's no need to fret, lad. Whatever's lost can be found again. There are always new paths between art for us to discover and traverse. Here, Pooh, a pot full of honey. It's your reward for being such a big help. Eat all you want.
You see, when I get a rumbly in my tumbly, it's very hard to think of anything but honey. So I was worried that I might have forgotten you away. Back for some more bouncing, Sora? Come on, let's go!
Sora! It's okay. He's my friend. I'm Lumpy. It's nice to meet you.
Dufferin, sassafras, stomp around a little louder, why don't you? I kind of like it when the ground gets bouncy.
Mike Wazowski.
We have got to get Buddha.
Mike Wazowski.
We have got to get Buddha safety first. Then we can take care of Randall.
You a top laugh collector? In your dreams, Randall, my laugh totals are off the charts.
The Wind Waker HD. Come on, audience. Are we ready? I think we're ready. Take it away, Linkus.
Это вообще сумма, я так понял, что это просто, да, она просто копится и показывает, что насколько они...
Thank you. Alright, so hello everybody, my name is Linkus7. Today we'll be doing a speedrun of The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker HD 100%, which is going to be very different from what you might have seen in last SGDQ. There's a few things I want to preface before I start the run, which might come up, because immediately when we start this run there's a few tricks coming up. So number one is you're going to notice that this game is in Italian. And that is because the text is basically shorter, and they sped up every language of the game except for Japanese, so it's the fastest one to play on. There's no other like regional changes in the HD version of this game. But yeah, I think we can basically start with one day.
Сейчас только что унизили кого-то, не знаю, кого.
Finally, Bidor was my dude, so I'm ready on time. In 3, 2, 1, go. So you're gonna notice straight away a difference from the HD version compared to the original, and that is that if you press the start button during intro, you can actually skip it, which was not a thing in the original. But when we start off right away here, you're immediately